Hey, I'm Emma Garlett, and on today's episode of Paint It Black, I want to talk about the age of criminal responsibility in Australia. I've previously spoken about it briefly in terms of the Banksia Hill Detention Centre. You can watch that at the link on your screen and in the description. Victoria recently became the second state in Australia to raise the age of criminal responsibility from 10 to 12. While many say it's a step in the right direction, there's also criticism about how long it will take to implement. In this episode, I'll be talking about the age of criminal responsibility around the world and what Australia is doing and what experts and the upcoming leaders are saying should be done. Join me as I paint it black. When you think about the 10-year-old children you know, regardless of how naughty they are, would you be comfortable sending them to a cell on their own? 10-year-old children still have their baby teeth, their brains aren't fully developed, and as a society would generally be horrified if we heard of parents going out and leaving their 10-year-old alone for the night. According to most kids' development blogs and research, 10-year-olds still need a babysitter, and that's about the age where we start giving them responsibilities. So why are we comfortable as a society to lock up 10-year-olds where, judging by recent reports from Western Australia, they could be mistreated? Australia is an outlier. We have one of the youngest ages of criminal responsibility in the world. The average age of criminal responsibility is 14. Countries such as Portugal have a minimum age of responsibility of 16, and in Brazil, Peru and Uruguay, it's 18. The US doesn't have a minimum age of criminal responsibility, but people under the age of 18 generally aren't subject to full criminal responsibility, but it's more fluid, and there have been cases where children have been tried as adults. One of the reasons put forward by people who are opposed to Australia raising the age of criminal responsibility is that we have in place a common law principle called doli incapax. That's Latin for incapable of wrong. It means the law presumes a child under the age of 14 does not possess the necessary knowledge required to have criminal intent, and it's a requirement by the prosecution to prove that the child knew what they were doing was wrong. The presumption can be disproved or rebutted by leading evidence to show that a child knew his or her actions were morally wrong. In practice though, doli incapax has proven to be extremely difficult to apply in court because, according to Chris Cunneen, Professor of Criminology at the University of Technology, Sydney, if we really believe 10-year-olds have the knowledge and developmental capacity to make life-changing decisions about what is right and wrong to a standard of criminal responsibility, then we would also treat them differently in other aspects of life. We would have a much younger age for when children can engage in consensual sex, leave school, get married, and sign a contract and vote. But we don't. We prefer to protect, assist, and guide young children and adolescents into adulthood. But doli incapax is what governments rely on to justify a low minimum age.
It doesn't work well in practice in terms of preventing young children from coming into the criminal justice system. And part of the reason for that is that the threshold for demonstrating that the child knew what they did was seriously wrong has been weakened over the years.
If doli incapax is generally applied in most circumstances, it simply only serves to traumatise children who, in a lot of cases, have already experienced trauma, abuse or neglect at home. A lot of experts, including the Law Council of Australia, say this could all be mitigated by raising the age of criminal responsibility to 14. Putting it rather bluntly, at 12, a child cannot lawfully sign into Facebook, but can be questioned, arrested, detained and imprisoned. Late last month, Victoria became the second jurisdiction in Australia to increase the age of criminal responsibility from 10 to 12 years old. In November 2022, the Northern Territory raised the age to 12, a move which the National Children's Commissioner described as a welcome first step only. But academics, medical professionals and First Nations leaders agree that Australia has a long way to go, and even 12 years old is still too young. Both Victoria and the Northern Territory have agreed to raise the age to 12, before gradually increasing the age to 14 by 2027. When speaking about why raising the age to 14 would take several years, Victorian Attorney General Jacqueline Symes said, "We want to make sure no young person falls through the cracks." Now, there will be people saying, but there are kids who commit crime. What do we do with kids under 14? We can't just let them off the hook. According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, children aged 10 to 14 made up 4.3% of all crimes committed between the year 2021 and 2022. And according to a 2020 report by the Australian Human Rights Commission, the younger children are, when they encounter the criminal justice system, the more likely they are to reoffend. Instead of having a reactionary approach to juvenile justice, we need to look at why the kids would be acting out and address those. Things like poverty, abuse, disadvantage, racism, mental health issues, and disability are just a few reasons why. Royal Australian and New Zealand College of Psychiatrists statistics reveal more than 75% of imprisoned children are living with one or more mental illnesses, and they say by locking up children we're causing irreparable harm to the people that need support and care the most. And those statistics get worse when you look at the Indigenous population. First Nations Australians are the most incarcerated people in the world. Despite making up just 3% of the population, they account for 32% of the prison population. According to Amnesty International, Indigenous children are locked up at 17 times the rate of non-Indigenous children, and specifically in Western Australia, Aboriginal young people are overrepresented in Banksia Hill, WA's only juvenile prison. According to the WA Department of Justice, 75% of the youth population at Banksia Hill identified as Aboriginal. There have been many reports of mistreatment of youth at Banksia Hill, and social campaigners have long called for change, but so far their advocacy has fallen on deaf ears. With the youth criminal justice system in crisis and repeated calls for a system overhaul, we know the system is broken. This was highlighted on New Year's Eve. It was only a matter of time until the inevitable happened and we had cracks in our broken detention system widen and erupted, and a riot broke out. At the time, WA Premier Mark McGowan rejected calls to raise the age of criminal responsibility to 14, saying, "I don't support raising it to 14 under any circumstances. There is now a national discussion around lifting it to 12, and we are part of the national discussions." Raising the age of criminal responsibility to 12 years old is a good start. As the age of criminal responsibility gets raised, as in Victoria, we need to ensure we have the resources and services the children need to remain out of the criminal justice system. It's about stopping the cycle. In 2019, then 12-year-old Duran Hussain released a documentary called In My Blood It Runs. It documented his life while he was 10, as he got in trouble at school, how disconnected he felt to the rest of his peers, and gave an insight into what goes on behind the scenes when kids that young get into trouble with the law. The documentary has been praised for giving a glimpse into why some young people, even ones with a supportive family, will act out and get in trouble with the law, and shows how the abuses committed against children in juvenile detention are being used as deterrents.
Do you want to get locked up with those other kids? This is your last chance.
Juan spoke at the UN in 2019 to highlight the issues many Indigenous children face growing up. I want to leave you with him talking about his experience.
I was always worried about being taken away from my family. I was nearly locked up in jail. I was lucky because my family, they know I am smart. They love me. They found a way to keep me safe. There are some things I want to see changed. I want my school to be run by Aboriginal people. I want adults to stop crueling 10-year-old kids in jail.
Thank you for watching Paint It Black with me, Emma Garlett. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Have a good one.